Hi, and welcome to the Culinary Classroom. I am Michelle Bisbee, Culinary Specialist with the Department of Education Child Nutrition Programs. Today we're going to be talking about Standard Operating Procedures, or SOPs as they're known in our field. SOPs are a collection of documents that will explain to your staff how to do just about any task required of them in the kitchen. It is required that all school kitchens have documented SOPs. We will look at this when we are there for administrative reviews. The 5 SOPs that we are going to be looking at today include personal hygiene, hand washing, using and calibrating thermometers, hot and cold holding for time temperature control for safety, and cleaning and sanitizing food contact surfaces. So let's get started. The first SOP that we're going to go over is personal hygiene. This is the first one that every employee should be concerned with upon their arrival to work. The first thing they want to look at is, are they showing up in a clean uniform? Now, a uniform in your kitchen could be a chef coat, could be a school logoed shirt, could be a polo shirt. No matter what you choose as your employee's uniform, it must be clean. When they come into work, you want to make sure your employees are washing their hands and then placing a clean apron on. All of these things are very important to prevent food contamination from your staff. Other things that need to be in your personal hygiene SOP include language about fingernails. Not only should it be in your SOP, but it is part of the Maine Food Code that fingernails must be maintained neat, clean, and trimmed. If you are going to allow your staff to wear nail polish or acrylic nails, they will then be required to wear single-use gloves at all times. But that is your choice. You do not have to allow them to wear fingernail polish or acrylic nails. Another thing that is required is language about jewelry. It is required that it states on your SOP that nothing other than a plain wedding band is allowed. According to the Maine Food Code, a medical bracelet is also not allowed. You'll want to double check. Some plain appearing wedding bands might have a single stone in them. If this is the case, it is not allowed in the kitchens. Another thing very important in your SOP is talking about hair restraints. Under Maine Food Code, it is required that a hair restraint must be worn. Now this can be a hat, a skull cap, a hairnet. This also includes beard nets or clothing that covers any sort of body hair. For instance, my hair being braided is not considered restrained. I would be required to put a hat on, and now I'm good to go to work and my hair is restrained. Another thing to mention is when using single-use gloves, which is required when handling ready-to-eat food, you want to make sure the gloves fit properly. They are not too tight so that you don't run the risk of them tearing, but they're also not too large. That way, when you are cutting food, you don't run the risk of cutting off the tip of the glove and having a physical contaminant in your food. And make sure when your employees remove their gloves, they then throw them in the trash. The next SOP that we're going to talk about is washing hands. This is a very important SOP to have because it applies to not only the beginning of the day of work, but throughout the day. An employee must know that they are required to wash their hands upon arriving to work, anytime that they're switching tasks, when they have taken a lunch break and come back to work, anytime after they eat, drink, anything. If you touch your hair, you touch your face, you need to wash your hands. Anytime you change out single-use gloves, it is required that you wash your hands. It is one of the easiest ways to prevent foodborne illness from occurring. A couple of things that need to be in your SOP in regards to hand washing that we will look at when we come on site for administrative reviews is, do you have a designated hand washing station? Only those sinks that are designated for hand washing should be used to wash your hands, and they should not be used for anything else. You do not use those for rinsing out a cup or washing off an apple or things like that. This is their sole purpose, and this is the only place you are to wash your hands. A designated hand washing station has some required items. It must have warm water. It must have soap. It must have a form of drying your hands, whether it be an air dryer or a single-use disposable paper towel. and it must have a waste receptacle for those paper towels. There also must be a sign to explain to your employees the proper method of washing your hands, how long they need to do it for, the steps that they need to take from start to finish of washing their hands. We will look at this stuff and we will question employees to see if they truly know the proper way to wash their hands. The next SOP that we're going to go over is using and calibrating thermometers. This is a very important SOP for your staff to be familiar with, as it helps to prevent foodborne illness by ensuring that the equipment that you have is being used properly and is working properly. It is very important for your staff to know how to use the thermometers in your kitchen. In this particular video, we are using a bimetallic stemmed thermometer. So that is the example that we're going to be talking about. With a bimetallic stemmed thermometer, you can see, if you're looking at your own, that there is a little dimple on it. You want to make sure that your staff know that when they are temping foods, that that dimple must be inside the food, because that is where the temperature is most accurately registered. You also want your staff to understand that these need to be cleaned between each use, so that way you don't have any cross-contamination issues. When we come on site for an administrative review, we could very easily ask your staff if they know how to properly calibrate a thermometer. So let's walk through the steps of that real quickly. So the first thing you want to do is get a cup large enough to fully submerge your thermometer, fill it with ice, and then with water. You want to completely submerge your thermometer into the ice water and let it set for about 2 minutes or until the dial stops moving. During that time, it'll hopefully read at 32 degrees, plus or minus a degree is okay. And if you notice, I actually took the handle of the thermometer and I slid it through the thermometer itself, because it looks like a little wrench almost. And that will actually turn the little nut on the bottom of your thermometer to adjust where the thermometer is reading if you need to. This one is reading accurately, but if you needed to adjust that, you just make sure that nut falls right into place and give it a little bit of a turn, and then just double check to make sure the temperature is still accurate. If your kitchen uses digital thermometers, you will not be able to make this adjustment, but it is still very important that you check the calibration of your thermometer every week. This is a requirement in child nutrition programs, and it must be documented. You can either have a separate temperature log, or you can document it on your production sheets, whatever is easiest for you and your staff. In this SOP, we are talking about hot and cold holding for time and temperature control for safety. This one directly relates to the calibrating thermometers one because you use your thermometer. So once again, it is very important to make sure your thermometers are working properly. Just like the thermometer SOP, this one also is important for helping to prevent foodborne illness by making sure that the temperatures that you're holding your foods at are safe. This one is really important as well because it tells your staff what temperatures things need to be held at. It tells your staff how to properly use the equipment for holding food. For instance, hot boxes, they need to be preheated before you put your food in. If you put your food in to be held at a hot temperature before your hot box is preheated, you run the risk of holding your food at an unsafe temperature. Your SOP for hot holding food, or hot and cold holding, needs to state that hot food should be held at 135 degrees or above, and cold foods need to be held at 41 degrees or below. It also needs to talk about checking the temperatures on your units, making sure that your refrigerators and your freezers are at the proper temps. Your hot boxes or holding units are at the proper temps. Your steam tables, those need to be at the proper temps. It is very important that your staff know how often you are going to require them to check the temperatures of the foods. It is important that they know to check the temperature before they pull it out of the oven to make sure it is done cooking. It is important for them to check the temperature before they put it out for service to make sure that it is still being held at a safe temperature for service. And not too hot, because that can actually deteriorate the quality of your food and it could be unsafe for the children that you are serving. It is also really important for your staff to know that taking the temperature before service is not the end of it. They need to also take the temperature if the food has been out on the line for more than 2 hours. It is important to check that that food is still being held at the proper temperatures. If it is not at the proper temperature at 2 hours, you still have time then to get it back up to the proper temperature and have it be safe for service. The last SOP that we're going to talk about today is cleaning and sanitizing your food contact surfaces. This is probably the most used procedure in your kitchens, as it not only applies to your work surface, but any item that you use to cook food in or store food in. All of these are considered food contact surfaces. This is also a procedure that is not only done before you begin your day, but throughout your day as you change tasks and at the end of the day to ensure that you leave a nice clean workspace. It is important that your staff know the proper methods to cleaning and sanitizing your work surfaces. If we're talking about your tables, you want to make sure that your staff have the correct buckets and the correct solutions inside of them. It is important that your staff follows manufacturer's instructions for using the cleaning solutions and the sanitizing solutions. You want to make sure that each bucket has its own designated towel and that these don't transfer from bucket to bucket. If using a 3-bay sink to clean your pans, your cutting boards, things like that, make sure that your staff know which sink should be for which step in the process. You want to make sure that they know that it goes in order: wash, rinse, and then sanitize. And it is very important that they know that things that have been sanitized should not be dried with a towel. They need to be allowed to air dry. The same goes for your work surface. You want to make sure that you first wash away any food debris. You thoroughly wash it, you rinse off your table to remove any detergent, and then you sanitize it and allow it to air dry. That ensures that your sanitizer is staying on the surface long enough to complete the job. Now that we've gone over all of these different SOPs that need to be available in your kitchen, I want to note that it is important that you customize these SOPs for how you do the procedures in your own kitchens. If you do not transport foods, you should not have an SOP for that. At the end of every SOP is a page where you can date and sign when the SOP was implemented, any time that it is reviewed, and any time a revision is made to your SOP. These should be reviewed with your staff at a minimum on an annual basis, or anytime a new staff member is hired on, they should be given these to review before beginning work so that they know what you expect from them in your kitchens. This is something that is very easy for us to look at and double check while we are on site for an administrative review. Another great thing about reviewing these is this counts towards your professional development hours.